Radio Show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV Radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Fission Radio Show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear.
Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners. This is Lonnie Clark with the Age of Fission radio show. That's Fission, F-I-S-S-I-O-N, since that is the new age that we're living in post-Fukushima. Today is Wednesday, and as you know, we do interviews on Wednesdays with activists and healers around the world. And I want to remind people to continue to walk in love and really be joyful, be grateful for the life we have. This is an exciting time. It's on our watch that we get to save the planet, folks, because we have come up against a wall that really, it's going to take all of us to take action. So in that vein, I want to introduce probably one of the best activists. I wouldn't even say anti-nuke activists, but I would say one of the best activists that we have had in our country since I've even looked into it, and that is Miss Patty Ameno. Hey, Patty, thank you for joining us again today. I really appreciate it.
Hi, Lonnie. It's always a pleasure. Thanks for having me again.
Well, you're welcome. And you know what? You can come on here anytime. And I like to say we're getting our amino acids today. So, we have got to learn how to do what you did. So as a little bit of a background, why don't you give us like a real quick synopsis? Because I want to spend some time. You were with us before sharing your story. But for those of us who didn't catch it, because I'd like to spend some time after you synopsize how you got engaged in this, talking about NUMEC. The company that has, basically gone unchecked. So why don't you give us a little bit of your background, how you got into this?
Well, how I got into it, I was born and raised in Apollo, Pennsylvania. And I, went to school and everything. And our house was situated less than 100 feet from an abandoned steel mill. And when I graduated, went down to D.C. and then got picked up. I joined the service, and so after that, furthered my education. Got picked up by the Defense Department as a federal criminal investigator. And when I was in the Navy, let me backtrack. I worked with Naval Investigative Service and got slews of training there. So after my stint with the Navy, and after furthering my education, and then becoming a federal criminal investigator and putting my papers in after that, I came back home in December of 1988, where my father had told me that the plant across the street was going out and that he was concerned. And I said, about what? He says, well, that's a nuclear facility. And that was actually the first time I had ever heard nuclear as reference to the plant that was across the street, because for years they still had the sign up on the side of the building, the Apollo Steel Mill, and then I remember Babcock and Wilcox going up. But the words nuclear radiation or atomic never came up. And when you're young, you do what kids do. You're dealing about your life and, interacting in a social way. And, of course, back then, I was born in 1951 and going to school and graduating in 1969. Our social network was getting out and being amongst the people, not, computers just weren't there. And so the people had an extremely high level of trust in our government back then. So everybody had this comfort zone with respect if anybody knew that it was nuclear, because people in the communities worked it. There was this comfort zone of the government, that would protect the people.
Yeah, we really believe that they would say something if something was seriously wrong.
And protect the people, right?
Yeah.
And so when I came back home in December of 1988, my dad he was concerned, and he wanted me to use my expertise in investigations and look into it, because they were going out and they were doing testing around and with all the stacks that they had. So I promised him I would, and the promise made is a promise kept with me, and still doing it.
Mm. Well, look, this is the shock about what happened. Now, what happened to the people in your town that prompted, your dad to actually think? I mean, your dad. My question is, when 3 Mile Island happened, what year was this? What year did he ask you to get engaged in investigating this?
It was December of 1988, and 3 Mile Island happened in 1979, if my recall is correct.
Right. Now, when 3 Mile Island happened, did anybody in your community go, wait a minute, what are we doing with this nuclear facility right across the street from us?
No, I really don't think so. I don't know, because, you're talking a reactor versus
a processing
an abandoned
facility.
Steel mill with,
right.
Local locals working in it.
Now, how big is your town? How many people are we talking about?
Well, when I was coming up, Apollo at best may have had 2,500 people. And, of course, that's been disintegrating, because not only did the people at epidemic rates start getting cancers, and cancers are still going on here, make no mistake about that. If somebody dies from something other than a cancer here, therein is the anomaly. But the cancers were taking a hold big time. So, I mean...
So it was a little tiny town, so when you have a small population dying of a common disease, it does raise the ire of people. I get that.
Well, yeah, when I think the population now of Apollo is maybe about 1,600, and if you go through the town, I'll tell you, it just makes me sick. It makes me sick, because the history of that town is being erased. The town actually looks like it has cancer. And, that cleanup, when I came home, was already established with respect to government paperwork to move forward. And so when I came home, I kept trying to raise the awareness of the people who were firm believers. And one of the impediments, the biggest impediment of effectuating a better cleanup for Apollo was somebody in our local council, and actually the local council, because they believed the government, and there were people who were getting benefit. They're having some benefits from the company. There was one guy I went to school with, and he had told me, why am I making such a ruckus? Babcock and Wilcox, they've been friends to the town, and they've been friends to him. And after all, they bought him a new water heater. And I looked at him and I said, is that all it took?
Wow.
The cost of a water heater for you?
Wow.
To turn your back on your community.
Wow. Isn't that similar to what we see going on in St. Louis? I mean, before the show, you and I were talking a few minutes. We now have 4 leaking nuclear sites in our country, and people are turning their backs on it.
At least we have it. At least, because there is this feeling of hopelessness and helplessness going on within the people of this country. We don't feel like we have control, but we have to educate the people all over again.
That's right.
that the people are the ones who do have control if they stand up,
That's right.
if they speak up, and if they act up. And I'm talking civil disobedience. I'm not talking going out and doing riots and burning things down. I'm talking civil disobedience. Hit the streets, march. We need organizers here because, you know, the death, not only of our country and the people and future generations, because these illnesses, these cancers, these, genetic mutated effects are going to continue from the exposures just from these Cold War plants.
Look at the mass animal deaths that are going on. I mean, it is, the patient, I mean, Dr. Helen Caldicott basically has said the patient is in critical condition and in dying. We're in the emergency room, folks. It's time for us to stop acting like things are okay, because things are not okay. I mean, I don't mean to, I'm not the, see, for me, this is on my show, what I make an effort to do on the airwaves, the few little hours that I have, is to give people the courage to face it. Because guess what? I firmly believe it's on our watch on purpose. We came into this. I don't believe any of us are accidents. We came into this. Our lives are here on purpose. And it's up to us. It's on our watch. And that means because we're put into this place, we have the capacity to manage it. And I think that part of how these perpetrators have been able to oppress the people is to make us all believe that we really don't matter. There's not much we can do, and we might as well just give up. And nothing could be farther than the truth. I mean,
yeah. Well, I've actually had people tell me, "Well, we're gonna, we born, we live, we die, but we have to die from something." Yeah. And I look at them and I said, "Well, really?" I said, "Well, how do you feel?" I asked them, "Do they have children?" Yes. I said, "Well, how do you feel that about your child in the unfortunate event that your child would get cancer at the hands of a nuclear industry?" I mean, this has been an invisible home invasion.
Yes, it is. And it is a war on us. I think it is a war on the population because actually it's so subtle. I mean, one of the things, I don't want to get into like conspiracy theories as to why. Let's get into NUMEC, because NUMEC is a really perfect example of how our country supports an industry that actually is using people, I think, as lab rats. That's the only thing I can think of. So give us a little bit of, I did a little quick research on NUMEC this morning before I gave you a call, and there is a lot, there's a lot of kind of secret subversive ties between NUMEC and the country of Israel, or what's going on with that? What's up with that? I don't know what's the truth on the internet. I found all these different stories, and one of them actually called you an Israeli operative, which I know is not true. So what's the facts about NUMEC, and tell us a little bit about their history.
Well, NUMEC started up in 1957 in the abandoned steel mill in Apollo, and it had dirt floors, Lonnie. It was less than 100 feet from my home that I grew up in. It had a wooden roof. It had glass around the sides of it. And they laid cement down for the floors. They put the production lines up. The plant ended up having 124 stacks. And it was situated in a valley with inversion, right in the corporate confines of a town, right up against a major road, Route 66, and right up against a major waterway that's used as a source of drinking water. And here's the other anomaly. Well, first, that was one of only 2 plants, nuclear plants, in the United States ever located in the corporate confines of a town. The other one is still up and running and started up the same year, a few months after NUMEC did, and that is Nuclear Fuel Services in Irwin, Tennessee. And, I'll go back to that one in a minute. But NUMEC was a total anomaly in that not only was it located in the corporate confines of a town, the buildings were co-joined with another business that had nothing to do with nuclear. They were a girder. They did girders for bridges. And when you went into NUMEC, in the inside of the building, it was entirely open air to the other business.
Oh, my God.
Oh, yeah. And doing the decommissioning of the NUMEC building, now, the NUMEC plant...
Now, hold on. I want us to talk about what NUMEC means, because NUMEC is an acronym. It means...
Right. NUMEC stands for Nuclear Materials and Equipment Corporation. And over the years, there was 3 owners.
Who oversees this corporation? I mean, are private industries allowed to handle nuclear material without oversight from the government?
No, not at all.
So how is it that this was allowed to just get so out of control that a town of 2,500 people have been decimated?
Well, one has to go back to, Dr. Zalman Shapiro, brilliant scientist. He's still alive. Brilliant. He had left Westinghouse and created his own business. And, of course, there comes a lot of notoriety with that in the science field. And he had a lot of patents that he wouldn't have been able to keep had he had stayed with, another company. So he was able to keep a lot of his patents and create a lot of different things like the zirconium cladding, et cetera. And so he started up NUMEC in 1957. It was him and Fred Forscher and Leonard Pepkowitz, and we also had a State Department guy there in the office by the name of Oscar Gray, who was a lawyer. And so here we go. But
is Oscar Gray still alive?
I believe he is. He was teaching at, I believe it was George Washington University Law.
I mean, you say he was an attorney, so I'm curious about how an attorney could work for a private...
He worked with the State Department before he came to NUMEC.
Working to keep the secrets of NUMEC, or is that what his real job title was, or what?
I think he was there to facilitate the government paperwork to where everything would have a open road without any bumps. Dr. Shapiro, his expertise, he's a brilliant scientist, but he had an expertise in salesmanship as well. And he learned that as a child after his father died. His dad was a rabbi, and his father died of a heart attack at a very young age and left his family penniless. And so Dr. Shapiro had to see his mother go out and become a seamstress and sell things door to door. And at a very young age, Dr. Shapiro he learned how to sell himself, selling ice cream and different things. He graduated from Johns Hopkins University with honors. This is a guy that was born and raised in Ohio, and then got his doctorate's degree as well. Now, let me go back here to NUMEC. NUMEC, under Dr. Shapiro's ownership and leadership, was 1957 to 1967. And then it got sold to Atlantic Richfield Corporation. And Atlantic Richfield Corporation was brought in by design by the AEC, and they were to rehabilitate the prostitute, and stocks went up, etc., and it calmed a lot of fears and what was happening in the years between 57 and 67, and Atlantic Richfield was in the business less than 3 years. And then waiting at the wings was Babcock and Wilcox to take over. Mm. Now, it's what happened in between 1957 and through the ARCO years that is really, well, even up through the Babcock and Wilcox years with respect to materials unaccounted for. There was such a throughput of material that was going up the stacks. And they had several events at the plant. There was February of 1963, there was a fire, uranium carbide, that I mean, it went up. My brother-in-law that worked there was actually involved in that. And another guy by the name of Bob Pugh, he was in the vault. I mean, what he had to go through was unreal. And I actually have these guys videotaped. They're no longer with us now.
I guess not.
And,
I mean, this is the point here, isn't it? Is like they can lie about the nuclear, but you know the harm that the nuclear is causing can't. I mean, it is killing people. That's the urgency of this. We can't just ignore this. Let me interrupt your train of thought on this one, because this is a point that I often think about. So Dr. Shapiro starts this organization. He understands things get lost. What kept all these scientists, what keeps these scientists from jumping up and down and going, wait a minute, we got to talk out, this stuff is being mishandled and it is a threat to all life on our planet. So have you spoken with them and said, hey, why don't you guys speak out?
The bottom line is the government ran the show on these sites. They wanted the product, and they wanted it at all cost. And so, you know, the things became for like your private companies like NUMEC. It was very competitive in bidding for like the contracts and getting an idea to, you know, that they had developed to get contracts to do something for like research and development and for the fabrication. And so, you know, the manpower hours that was dedicated to this, everything was done on a cost-based analysis. And there was a lot of process losses. I mean, the design of NUMEC's production line was done on the extreme cheap, and it was terribly flawed. And the government really didn't care about the loss. They wanted the end product. When they started caring about the loss was when workers started going to the AEC office. It was outside of Pittsburgh and Coriopolis, and talking about the health effects and being exposed. And, of course, they really thought that the AEC was an advocate for them.
Right.
I mean, can you imagine the reality later on in life that you're going to a government entity, understanding that they're supposed to be an advocate, and you find out that they're covering all your stuff up and the stuff that's going on at the plant that affects you and the people that are your neighbors that work with you at that plant? You know, it was just absolutely phenomenal. And so there were so many events there. It's such a sense of
betrayal. It's such a sense. I mean, the grief that happens when you go through that, to recognize that you have such a sense of betrayal is the hardest part. You know? Yeah,
and I saw this in a lot of the workers' faces and their wives too, because I mean, look, these guys made $1.50 an hour, meager wages, and so you know, to get poisoned, and then in a lot of cases they brought that stuff home because the plant would turn off the alarms, and these guys would walk out.
Oh my God!
Their cars in the parking lot where their cars were parked, and in the summertime, you know, people would leave their car windows down. Small town, nobody's going to do anything back into your car, especially, you know, inside a gated area. And so a lot of the concentration of the stacks, and a lot of them had hoods on them, that was a down blow. Those cars were hot too. That parking lot doing the decommissioning up there, it was so hot.
How many people in your community joined you? I mean, all these people got sick. How many people actually joined you in your fight? I mean, did you have big support while you were going through litigation?
Yeah, well, okay, prior to the litigation, there wasn't a bunch, but you have to understand what was happening here. Cancers were at massive levels, and you know, they're still high, but I mean, it was like every time you turned around. When I first came home and I went up a street, a block of 16 homes, there was 8. When I went up a couple years later, there were 12 cancers out of 16. Okay?
Oh my God.
Yeah, and so
that's 3/4 of the population.
You're exactly, and so you know, I first became aware of this significantly when I started noticing that a lot of their household pets like dogs, were coming up, high in cancers and tumors. So I went to the vet's office, all the veterinarians in the area, and they concurred there was a large amount of cancers in the animals. And then I went to the funeral homes, and they were seeing the same thing in the bodies, the humans. That made me take a foot, huh?
Will funeral homes give us those statistics? Like, if I was to go to a funeral home here in Eugene, I could say, I'm conducting a study, say, for school or something. Could you tell me what the cause of deaths are, the average cause of deaths are for the most people? Could you do something like that? Can they give you that information?
Well, I got it here. I don't know if they could actually give it to you without getting
you have
information.
A small
they
town,
could give you. They could probably give you a certain amount of statistics, but because I was always pretty well known. This is a small area.
Yeah.
I went through and I had asked each one of the funeral homes here, were they noticing a lot of cancers? And it was a resounding yes at all of them, and some rare cancers. And so while they couldn't give me the people's name without disclosures from their families, that allowed me to start going to a lot of these families and getting death certificates from them. And the one thing about Pennsylvania, not only do they list the immediate cause of death, such as heart failure or stroke, but the secondary cause, which is initially the main cause, and the heart failure is consequential to the disease that they had,
right.
And that would have been cancer. And different, the different types of cancers, cancer of the eye, cancer of the mouth, the appendiceal cancer. I mean, just some rare cancers.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and so New Mexico had a lot of problems, and there was a guy in Apollo. He was a retired science teacher, I believe. His name was Claude Nixon, and I remember this man so well. He used to walk down to the plant, guys, sit on the side porch, and carried a box. Here I later found out that those were industry equivalent Geiger counters. This man wrote letters. He created a paper trail. And he would have some of the guys in the town, some of the men in the town, witness what the readings were, and they would sign on to that. And so they wrote letters to the director of Occupational Health and Safety, because the DEP was not established back then in the 60s. And at the same time, he wrote a letter to the then U.S. Congressman John Saylor, who was an ardent conservationist with the Ginsu Dam and the Redwoods, etc. And that's what tripped the story of Israel, I believe.
That's what I was just about to ask you. If you put in NUMEC, you find all this stuff about, like, there's even a story that says Obama asked to delay NUMEC founder award over weapons material diversion to Israel. Is any of that real? Did that really happen?
The diversion? Okay. Look, we're never going to have 100% proof unless the government comes up and says they made a mistake, and the likelihood of that, or they misspoke, or let's tell it the way it is, or they lied. The thing of it is, all the accidents that were going, all the workers that were going to the AEC and complaining about the events and the health effects, wasn't only about just the workers. They were saying that there was releases into the community as well. And so, the AEC didn't want that stuff out. Mm-hmm. Plus, there was the losses. Plus, now you have Claude Nixon in the town with his Geiger counters, but more so, he took photographs. And when he sent it to Dr. Jan Lieben, who was the director of the Occupational Health and Safety, Dr. Lieben sent it down to Congressman Saylor, and Saylor also got the letter and photographs from Mr. Claude Nixon from Apollo. And what did John Saylor do with that, Congressman Saylor? He sent it to the Joint Committee on Atomic Energy as an inquiry. Now you have a congressional inquiry going on. That is one step away from a congressional investigation. It was whitewash time. And so somebody that sat there, and I believe it was the CIA, went to the infamous Washington Star and leaked a story that there was material from Numek that got diverted to Israel. It was a perfect storm, and it was a perfect story because Dr. Shapiro is, in fact, Jewish. And and there were Israelis that came to Apollo, but that was in 1968. And so the investigation would have already been much underway. When Israel has had their agents over here, we usually barely see their taillights leaving.
Right.
When,
Before we know they're even here. They come and go.
Exactly.
We don't even know they're here. That's true.
But the thing of it is, I uncovered documents from the Commerce Department, U.S. Commerce Department, the U.S. State Department, and the United States Atomic Energy Commission that gave these people pre-approval to come and visit our sites. Not just Numek. They were visited other sites. And specifically, the reason why they wanted to go to Numek is that at Numek's Parks Township plant, the plutonium facility, they had an energy conversion plant to where Dr. Shapiro came up with the plutonium battery. And they needed those batteries to spy on Egypt, for their spying equipment, surveillance equipment. And, of course, that, predated the Israeli-Egyptian conflict. And they had a heads up on it. I mean, they weren't going to use Everready out in the desert.
This really brings up this whole idea that there is so much. I mean, we really do have a deep state. We have this whole other government running itself, and we're just sort of inconsequential. We're sort of this is why the people of Apollo didn't matter, I think, because really, if you had not really decided to pick this fight, Patty, everybody in your town would have just silently died, and nobody would have said that been wiser for the worse. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, Lonnie, I didn't pick this fight. This fight picked me. I came home looking into the eyes of friends who had been burying their kids.
Right.
I have one friend, Mary Ann Hall, Cookie Hall. We call her Cookie because, man, can she bake and cook. Her daughter died in her arms on Christmas Day.
Oh, my God.
At the same time, the hospital was playing Silent Night, Holy Night. And she testified in court in the first federal civil action. That's all she could think about, that song. There it was, mother and child, and there she was. She said she never wanted to hear that song again.
This is so sad. This is why we cannot put this mantle down. This is why we have got to keep going at it, because really our children deserve a future.
Yeah. And there's so many kids. Jason LaManna, I grew up knowing his parents, Mary Torella LaManna and Chuck LaManna. And Chuck went to Apollo, and Mary went to Vandergrift, and we knew everybody from towns around. We'd go to dances and stuff.
How many towns around? I want to get back to Numek in a minute, but just as a quick idea, because you've been in this fight for over more than 25 years.
27 last December.
Yeah, this is the thing that I have learned in my 6 or 7 month exposure to the issues in St. Louis. There is so much more to the nuclear waste that has been dumped and secretly stashed, secretly abused. There's so many little pockets all around. Do you have is there any kind of network where we could actually track how many of these little organizations there were that the government put out there where they just like Malincrot, just dumped here, dumped there? I mean, there's stories that they dumped in Niagara Falls.
Well, oh my goodness, Numek there was a facility up there, and Lou Rashidi up there. If you speak to him, he can tell you about a lot of different things. Actually, he believes that's actually the first secret area up there for the Manhattan Project. And I don't know. I don't want to get into that, that maturation contest.
That's a big can of words. I get you.
Yeah. But the thing of it is, the Wall Street Journal did a story and on these Cold War sites. They profiled my site and the Westlake Coldwater Creek area as well. Now, the story on me and what I did was published on November 22nd, 2013. And, of course, at the top of the front page, they were revisiting the Kennedy assassination. In the bottom, it started. Prior to that, the week prior to that, I believe, or the month prior to that, they came out with their database, and it was massive, of the sites. However, what we don't have, and this is going to be really something, is where the company's buried at. You don't think they're going to stand up and say, yeah, we went to that one abandoned mines outside of the town and dumped in there. They're not going to do that.
No, and they probably don't even keep records of it.
Up until this past January, not this past year, January of last year, Atlantic Richfield and Babcock and Wilcox were vehemently fighting the continuation of the cleanup at my waste dump.
What?
That which has already been noted as having Category 1 material, already been noted that they lied on their characterization reports, already been noted that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission was deceptive not only to the people, to the other agencies, and already noted by the testimony, first time on the record, under oath to the government, by Dr. Zalman Shapiro, where he testified to the IG's investigators that they had multiple books at the plant, which means they were illegal out the gate, but that was with the approval of the AEC and the other agencies, and that they took on burials at the request of the AEC, and the majority of that came from AEC sites, such as Rocky Flats, i.e. Project Pluto. And so what are we talking about here? Well, we're talking about Category 1 material.
We're talking about the Atomic Energy Commission, which is now the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, knowingly, intentionally illegally burying nuclear waste around the country and not telling anybody, and exposing populations to exposure to nuclear. Is that essentially what you just said? That they knew?
That's exactly what I just said. That's exactly what I just said. Here's the thing on this, Lonnie. Here's the thing. They went to Dr. Shapiro. They went to NUMEC, and they wanted them to take on some of their stuff, from other sites. Probably the majority of them were their sites, to bury it. And what NUMEC felt that they were doing something that was legal. After all, this is the Atomic Energy Commission. They would have made provisions for this, but they didn't. And what would have happened if NUMEC would have said, no, we can't do that? Well, the contracts would dry up faster and get drier than the Sahara Desert. That's the government's motto, manus manum lavaat. One hand washes the other. If you don't wash our hand, we're truly not going to wash yours.
Wow. I have to say, I'm sitting here completely nonplussed, because what you're essentially saying is that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, this gives us the answers as to why what's going on at San Onofre, at Hanford, at Columbia Generating Station, at all these places where the NRC has official oversight on it. They really basically do not care about the population at all. The only thing
they care about is keeping the nuclear myth alive, okay? They have to keep the nuclear myth alive because it has been one of the largest drains on the taxpayers' coffers in more ways than one. And when you look at how we have subsidized the nuclear industry, when you look about how we have to keep it up, when you look at it how Our energy costs haven't gone down. I challenge anybody to stand up and tell me that they've had a rollback on their electric bills. Outside of having solar put up, it's really it's jaw dropping. And then when you figure, look at the cost of cancer. I mean, let's look at it the way they look at things in dollars and cents.
Right.
Okay.
Well, the reason they
think
want
about somebody loses their job and they're sick. What are they going on? They're either going on Social Security, disability, because these companies were kicking them to the curb. My brother-in-law worked there. He was excreting in his blood, or in his urine, blood. The company doctor was saying he was fine.
Oh, my God.
Okay?
Well, this whole thing about the cancer industry, it's a win-win for them. You know, they get to make us sick, and then we give them all of our money. And we beg for mercy as we're doing it. It's the most insane. It is really Mengele. It's, Mengele on steroids. It's actually the most insane thing that humanity has ever done to itself. It's
and the
worse.
National Institute of Health, NIH, has been at every last one of these cold water sites on the cancers, especially with rare cancers. They were here with respect to the appendiceal cancers and some of the other cancers. And, of course, they always had the workers. They had immediate access to the workers' files and medical records. And you look at this, and you have to go back. I have to go back, and you look at NUMEC, in the corporate confines of the town. Even the Silkwood plant was out in the boondocks.
Right.
Okay? And you have to wonder, okay, so this guy, he found this plant that he got for nothing. It was abandoned, needed a lot of work and stuff, okay? And he found investors to invest in it. But the bottom line is, it had to be approved by the Atomic Energy Commission. What the hell were they thinking? Well, I can tell you this. My scenario is Dr. Alice Stewart and Dr. Thomas Mancuso had years been studying the effects of radiation on the workers. And, of course, the AEC didn't like what they were coming up with.
Right.
And Dr. Mancuso got blackballed. I mean, he was actually terrified to talk on the phone. Terrified. But they needed a better model of what would happen in the event if we ever got hit. Just studying the men. They wanted to know, they wanted an actual representation of the population. That would be men, women, children, the unborn child. And they wanted to be able to have that pulse over time. And, of course, the doctors that were the doctors in the community were the doctors at the schools, were also the doctors at the plant here in Apollo, in the Apollo area. Indeed. Why would they put a facility? Why would they allow a facility in a corporate confines of a town? After the first accident that they had, it should have been shut down.
Well, they knew before. They knew before. They knew before any accident. They know how deadly this is. They already know. You want to know
how blatant it was? When I went to Chicago and I testified before the president's panel on worker radiation health to get NUMEC included in the EEOICPA compensation program, to which Cheney tried to stop. I had come across a document from the AEC to NUMEC, where in the 60s they gave NUMEC permission to run any and all of their 124 stacks 100 times over the legal limit. That was a 10,000% increase per stack. The sum concentration of 124 stacks is absolutely mind-boggling for a plant that's in a town, in a valley with inversion, in spitting distance from people's homes, right up against a major highway, right up against a major waterway. Are you kidding me? They allowed them to break the law. So the enforcer was breaking the law and enabling another one to break the law.
And
That's
this
criminal.
Is all just
this is criminal.
This is simply for a thirst for nuclear weapons? Is that what it's all about?
This is the thirst to further understand and refute any type of future challenges. They knew from early studies the effects.
Right.
Okay.
It hasn't changed yet either, as a matter of fact.
No,
it's
and
still
actually,
the same negative effects.
Yeah, you know, I don't. This mindset of constantly having more nukes, more nuclear weapons, more this and that for nothing but destruction. We talk peace in the world. You know, how can you talk peace when you have to have an enemy in perpetuity?
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's true. Well, you know, I know that you were in the service, so I'm a little bit sensitive to that, but I have to say that in my view, you know, the United States has been a warring nation from the get-go. I mean, we genocided the Native Americans. We have broken every treaty. We lie. I mean, you know, as much as I despise Monsanto Clinton, she really does reflect United States politics quite well, her and Donald Trump. As much as they repulse us, that's exactly, this is why the establishment wants them, because they perfectly reflect the establishment. I mean,
well, everything is driven by one thing, and that's power and money. You know, and through the course of the history of man, we have been a hostile planet. You know, for one thing, you know, you take the cavemen; it was the quest for fire. Okay, and if you know, one group didn't have it, they were soon to get picked on by another. The ones who had it were soon to get picked on by the ones that didn't, in the quest for the power. I mean, you know, we've just been a hostile planet, and
it's time for us to grow up as a species. It is time. That's what I think that this nuclear challenge is about. We are having we're having our come to Jesus moment. You know what I mean? Like, we are having to face what we have done, and it's time. I mean, I view the human species, as kind of adolescents, and we have to become adults. It is time for us to stand up, because this nuclear issue is not something that we can pretend any longer is not harmful. It will kill all life on our planet if we don't stop it.
Well, we're still seeing the effects of Chernobyl.
Yes, worse than ever, actually.
And Fukushima. You know, that's Chernobyl's on a milder scale compared to what happened at Fukushima, and still they're in denial. Here's the thing about Japan, though. You know, after we dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, years afterwards, do you know that Japan forbid any of our nuclear ships to even dock there at our base?
Yeah.
Okay? They were so anti-nuke. What happened? Who put the pressure on them?
That's right. Well, you know, they make a lot of money selling their nuclear waste. I think that's the pressure that they got made. You know, I mean, there was a lot of money selling their nuclear waste for those people.
Selling their nuclear waste? Who are they selling it to? Because nuclear waste can be reprocessed for use in many things.
Mm-hmm. So,
you know,
I mean, this is the
who's been monitoring this waste? Because here you got the Nuclear Regulatory Commission that has an office that's waste management, and that's an oxymoron right there. You know, they haven't managed not one bit of this waste. Why is it at every site that there's assessments going, the people going in and do the assessments of these Cold War sites, they're finding a hell of a lot more material that's buried there than what was stated was there.
Right. And
where's the accounting been on this stuff?
Not only that, that's about what I was about to say. Helen, I read this on Dr. Caldicott's website this past week. There's about 212 pounds of uranium just disappeared. Processed uranium just disappeared. The Navy has no idea where it went. Like,
when did this happen?
It's over the years. It's on her website. On
212 is nothing. There's more than that. They're suspecting that it was over 200 and some pounds just from NUMEC alone.
Oh, my God. Missing?
Just from NUMEC alone. And I got to tell you, the material unaccounted for, the muffs, far exceed 200 pounds from here.
They call it muffs. That's their acronym, muffs.
MUF, M-U-F, material unaccounted for.
That's
now understand, they had two terms. They had two different terms for their accounting. They had discards and they had muffs. And doing this investigation, which was over a decade long, matter of fact, that investigation's still open, on the alleged diversion material to Israel, which allegedly gave them the bomb. 200 pounds now. Look at this empirical 200 pounds. Okay?
Wow.
Now, this was in the 60s. And so, but the process losses kept going, and they were even increasing. Nobody was paying attention to that. But not only here at different sites, at an AEC site, the infamous Rocky Flats, they had a muff so high in plutonium, it was classified for 35 years.
Wow.
Diversion was never on the radar. Theft was never on the radar. The only thing that kept it classified was the implications to the environment. That equates to liability and litigation. And, of course, we're all fully aware of the litigation that ensued against Rockwell and the other company. I think, and the jury had initially awarded them, I think it was $532 million, and this was just for 6,000 property owners. This was
Patty,
not for cancers.
Let me ask you this again. I mean, my jaw drops as you say these things. So what you're saying is essentially the Atomic Energy Commission, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, they have this acronym, materials unaccounted for, and it's not because it's stolen, it's just they've lost it or it's been dumped somewhere that they don't want to admit. And the reason they're calling it unaccounted for is because they don't want to admit where it's been illegally dumped, so they don't have to pay for the litigation of the harm it's causing to the people in the environment.
No, because the material unaccounted for is the kind that went into the environment, and therefore they cannot account for that.
Oh my God! So that's
that's what. And so let me tell you, there was a guy that was with the NRC. His name is Roger Matson. Now he testified in the first court case that I spearheaded. And he was interviewed by the FBI on the alleged diversion material to Israel. And, of course, when you get interviewed by the FBI, that's a significant thing, you would think. And of course, it was under oath. And he headed up. He was kind of like the czar over this missing material. And when he was asked under oath about the diversion, he said there was no diversion. It was process losses. Now, in court, he denied ever being interviewed by the FBI. He was destroyed. And he was, at the time of the trial, he had retired from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and was a paid prostitute as an expert witness for the industry and American Nuclears and Shores. He hasn't been able to work as a paid prostitute for the industry since that trial. He was totally discredited on the stand. And so what has he done since then? Because I actually spoke to him on the phone. He wanted to know if I knew anything about it. And I was surprised he even called me. This was after the trial. And I said, yeah, I know about the diversion. He said, well, what do you know? I said, I know that there was a diversion, all right. He said, yes. I said, but it wasn't a diversion material to Israel. It was a diversion of attention to what was really happening, because everybody loves a salacious story, especially with Israel.
Right.
You know, and that's a double-edged sword, because Israel's revered by many, but Israel is hated by many. Right. There's still a lot of quiet anti-Semitics in this country.
Well, not even just the anti-Semitics. There's people like me. Like, I love the Jewish people. I love the idea of the Jewish state, but I hate what they're doing to the Gazans and the Palestinians. You know what I mean? That's kind of like that sort of we're sort of tied between we love the Jewish people, we love their traditions, we believe that they have this, but I'm just going to say this, it's my opinion only. I think that the current Israeli state has been a manipulation. It's not a true Israeli state, but not a true Jewish state. The current Israeli state is a manipulation of the industrial military complex, and they're being used for those purposes. But that makes my
that's
own
a possibility.
You know, that
That's a
my own
possibility.
family members who are Jewish get really inflamed when I say that. So I'm just going to say that's entirely my opinion, my observation. But so there's a lot. It's not that people are anti-Semitic. We hate a lot of the crimes against humanity that the state of Israel is actually perpetrating. They are perpetrating crimes against humanity on a regular, daily basis against not only the Palestinians but their own people. Because to make a
Wait a minute, Lonnie.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Here's the thing. I think the Israelis have an exceptionally high level of intelligence that they are able to gather. They've been known for this. That's number one. Number two, Israel is a country that doesn't forget their history. And their history is that if you give somebody an inch, they'll inevitably take a mile. Now,
we could get into this, but I'm going to tell you what, in my view, I think Israel has turned into what they hate.
Well, I'll even
so we'll
maybe so. But I'll tell you one thing that Israel definitely is. They're really protective of their people. They protect their people. They provide for their people over there. Healthcare. I mean, everything.
Well, you know, I get that, but what I am opposed to is the apartheid state that they have forced the Palestinians to live under. I mean, I get it, and so that's a bigger issue, but... That's
somebody else's politics, and I don't think we need to stick our nose in anybody else's politics if it's not harming us. I think we need to pay attention to what the hell's going on right here in this country.
Well, this is my thing about the whole Israel conversation. We give them billions of dollars every year. We have a right to say where our money goes. And in fact, I think, as I said earlier, they're an arm of the industrial military complex, and I think that the people are being badly manipulated. And this indication of the nuclear weapons, all this nuclear mess that we're doing, somehow it's all linked in. And, you know, we haven't really uncovered the real story on all of this.
Okay, wait a minute. Wait a minute, Lonnie. Let me put the brakes on here. We give Israel approximately $3 billion a year. $3 billion a year. Now, China, what do we give them? We've given them all our industry. We've given them all our industry, and we were crying against crimes against humanity that they were, killing female babies? You know, the polluting of the environment over there?
Look, I think that's...
How are we dictating to China? I'm saying if we're going to do something, we have to be consistent across the board, or we just leave countries to their own, dealing with their own stuff, and let United Nations deal with it, and we got to deal with stuff at home. We have spread ourselves so thin over putting our nose into everybody else's business that doesn't deal with our own national security. And national security, to me, is not only about defense, it's about financial security, too. We've been sold out.
Yes, we've been sold out, and it starts with the industrial military complex. This is what I
think.
I mean, I really believe we have this deep state, and I mean, this issue about Israel, this is the interesting thing about this whole thing with NUMEC and how it's all tied in. So, look, let me just caution us.
Yeah.
We have a minute left. A minute and a half left, so let's back from the Israeli thing. What I would like to do is, in this minute and a half, is first off, thank you, Patty Ameno, for joining us, because it is always a pleasure to speak with you and to engage with you on this, because you show us how to be an activist. You show us what we have to do, how to do the diligence, and this is what really does matter. And for that, I sincerely appreciate you joining us.